we're going to get started. Thank you everyone for coming to Accessibility New York City, our March event. We're really excited to have so many people here for today's event. And from the chat, we've already seen we have people from really all over the world, Europe, Asia, US, North America. So thanks everyone for being here. I'm Thomas Logan from Equal Entry, and I'm one of the organizers of Accessibility New York. We have been doing this event for over 7 years now in New York City, and we potentially sometime in the future here in New York City, we'll start having this event also in person again. We do want to say that every time we've done this event, we have always had the event also online. We believe that having online access and having online inclusion is part of a successful in-person event as well. And we want to thank Jolie McPhee from the Accessibility Special Interest Group of the Internet Society for helping make sure that we always have a live stream of our events. We also want to thank Kathleen from Texas Captioning for the captions for today's event. Additionally, we have 4 sponsors for our events. We have Adobe, Digital Media and Digital Marketing Solutions, Equal Entry, Accessibility Consultancy, Fable, an accessibility platform powered by people with disabilities, and Google, the American IT company I'm sure you're familiar with. So those 4 companies, we want to say thank you so much for providing us sponsorship money and helps make sure that our events are accessible, able to be streamed, and also have accessible captions when we post them online. And with that being said, I'm thrilled to have Adrian Roselli here with us today to talk about a always exciting topic and one that he has tons of information to share with us about today, Overlays Underwhelm. Take it away, Adrian.
Thanks, Thomas. I'm going to try to figure out what is the right distance from my microphone, so if you can't hear me at some point, I apologize. Also, my awesome neon sign is off because when it's nighttime, it is brighter than the surface of a very blue sun. So you just have to look at me. Hi, thanks for attending. The title of this talk is Overlays Underwhelm. I had the title before I had the content though, so it might not be the best fit. We'll find out. Basically, I'm going to try to shoehorn this over-under theme into the talk throughout. Good news is I'm protected from hearing your groans thanks to the magic of one-way audio. A little bit of context. This is my ego slide, just to give you the barest indication that I have some experience. I want my arguments to stand on their merit, but I understand you might want to know my technical chops, my background, etc. So business, books, sites, articles, all that stuff, I've just thrown some examples of that up on the site. You can look me up at adrianroselli.com to confirm this stuff or to hire me as a consultant. I'm also on Twitter at AARDRIAN. You can probably go block me now. So now into the meat of the talk. Overlays Underwhelm. What we should do is consider what gaps accessibility overlays are filling. The web has lots of accessibility bits already built in, and there are more tools and features available to developers and users than there ever have been before. After all, as Tim Berners-Lee said, quoting him here, the B4520 gets you there faster and bypasses that nasty roundabout outside Swindon, end quote. Now, I might have gotten that quote wrong, but the gist was the power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect. That's his actual quote. I'm obligated to put his quote into an accessibility talk when it's a broad talk, because otherwise I would not hit the cliche. You can get your own quotes from, well, I'll put a link to it in my slides when they get posted. So let's first ask, what is an overlay? An overlay is essentially a tool that provides some sort of accessibility or usability feature that may or may not be built into the underlying site. Sometimes it replicates a native feature. Sometimes it offers some other kind of affordance. Often it does the work in the end user's browser. So it's relying on each user's computer to replicate the same work as every other user's computer. It doesn't happen once, it happens once per visitor. Overlays can also be referred to as widgets, toolbars, add-ons. There are a few different things people have called them throughout the years. So there were many tools that predated some of the native features that we might be used to now, or that were created to fill some gaps in technology, including assistive technology. Some techniques and standards may not have been defined or even well supported when these tools were created. The risk is that these tools required users to learn them anew for every site, with features that would not carry across sites. Here's an early example, Browse Aloud. It converts the text on a page to speech. And if I can get the cursor there, there's some audio that will be playing in a moment.
GB flag. Change region. Products. For education. Read and write. Equatio. Speech stream. RIQ. Fluency tutor. Orbit note. For work.
I'm just going to stop it there. As you can see, Browse Aloud offers no context for what is being read, whether it's visible or not. It was never meant to replicate what screen readers can do. Instead, it's more similar to a feature that you can find built into browsers today, such as Edge's Immersive Reader. Browse Aloud also requires a third-party embedded script, and back in 2018, this was briefly hacked to mine cryptocurrencies. In the slides that I'll post afterward, I will have some links to that information as well. Okay, it's playing it again. Now, some widgets made an effort to replicate features already in browsers and in operating systems. These range from text sizing to contrast and lightness to motion control and even zooming and magnification. In this video, this is a text sizing widget on the New York Times site, which shows how they can go wrong. It's no longer available on the New York Times site, so you won't see this in action anymore. But assuming you could find it behind a gear icon, the control only appeared when you were at the top of the page. And the widget only resized article content, not headlines, not navigation, nothing else. And since the article content was outside the viewport, it also made it near impossible to compare the sizing options. It also didn't retain the size as you navigated throughout the site. So when you return to the site, or even if you tried to print the site, those new sizes that you set wouldn't be kept. Better implementations have shown users how to change their browser or operating systems instead. So don't make it a one-off, but educate them so they can carry that forward. However, this kind of feature could be a useful stopgap feature to gauge if users regularly scale text, and then instead of adding the feature, remove it and make the text bigger if that's what you find users are doing. So that's just an approach of how you could get some benefit out of one of these. Now, some widgets exist because there is no native equivalent, or the needs aren't well represented in what exists. Success of those widgets really comes down to how well they perform. Now, this is Hand Talk. It's another add-on. What this does is load an animated avatar to sign the content of a page, in this case, American Sign Language. Like the text-to-speech example earlier, it presents the content of the page in sign language, but it still can't offer the same context for what content is associated with what other content. So the user may also need to read along. I didn't explore how many sign languages it supports. To its credit, though, it's not fingerspelling everything that it encounters, but I would leave that to the audience to judge its value. Now, the current list of overlay vendors is not necessarily filling these gaps. They are capitalizing on a general lack of understanding of people and needs, and they are focusing on selling quick fixes to businesses instead. These companies, this is not necessarily all of them, but it includes Accessibility, Accessaway, AdAlley, AudioEye, EqualWeb, Facility, Max Access, Purple Lens, User First, and UserWay. There are also vendors that white label some of these products. So you might find another vendor who is white labeled and is reselling the UserWay widget, for example. Overlays tend to overstate their abilities. In technical reviews, they consistently underperform. Automated accessibility testing tools aren't perfect. We already know this, but we can use them to get a sense of whether or not an overlay has improved WCAG compliance of a page. I used an automated checker to compare the number of errors before and after an overlay was activated. And the page typically had more detectable WCAG errors after. And when I say typically, I mean in every case. There might be exceptions, I just haven't found them yet. The examples that follow are, at this point, about a year old, a little more than a year old. I opted not to retest them because I don't want to provide free testing to these vendors. That's not my thing. And besides, these vendors were claiming WCAG compliance when I tested them back then. So if they were lying then, there's no reason to assume that they would stop lying now. So this is DQ's Axe browser plugin, which prides itself on no false positives. As a result, it might be more lenient than a human tester would be. After running an overlay on the vendor's own page, in this case, it's Accessibility, the number of detectable errors identified by Axe tripled from 4 to 12. TPGI's Arc Toolkit plugin is less likely to be lenient. When testing the same page on the Accessibility site, the number of detectable errors doubled, jumping from 19 to 38 when the overlay was activated. Arc also jumped from 164 warnings to 193. These don't represent clear WCAG violations, but they are flags to let you know that you need to do some manual testing, that there might be some issues. WebAIM's Wave Checker browser plugin returned no violations without the overlay active. After the overlay was activated, a single contrast violation appeared. I've written about my concern that Accessibility was spoofing Wave, though I cannot wade into the code to confirm this. I think some other people have. Wave used to display a message. Specifically, it read, quote, "A third-party Accessibility integration on this page may temporarily modify content when Wave is activated, resulting in interference with Wave's detection of and accuracy identifying accessibility and compliance issues," end quote. That tells me that they also suspected something was up. So we know automated accessibility testing tools only identify about 30% of potential issues. And that number shifts based on complexity and other factors. That's a known thing. That 30% number acknowledges that much of WCAG itself requires human judgment based on context. Overlay vendors tend to claim they can address the other 70%. It's a bold claim and surprisingly easy to disprove. Here, the Stop Animations button that appears in this overlay fails to stop the auto-playing background video. That flag just keeps waving. To compound the confusion, the button changes only its accessible name when pressed. It does not use ARIA press to indicate it has been activated or any other programmatic change of state. Now, you'll see that the video has stopped playing. That's simply because I did not record any longer of a video than this for my slides. Here is me trying the keyboard navigation feature of one vendor. Since its unaddressed navigation violates 1.4.13 content on hover and 2.4.7 focus visible. Even after I activate the feature, focus styles are still missing. Eventually, a new box appears with different links. I was tabbing so much already, I tabbed past the item that displayed the instructions. Oops. But to drive home the point, it dropped me into a de facto keyboard trap in its cookie pop-up. You could hear me pressing that key harder and harder out of anger. Now, it's not just the claimed fixes that don't work. The tools themselves present barriers. The button in that background video is just one example, one we saw a few moments ago that would not stop the flag. In other cases, screen reader users have noted that they hear sounds from the overlay with no explanation of what they mean. The tools don't even prevent their own customer from making new WCAG violations. So here, the overlay is very tall. So what I did is I captured 4 screenfuls for what you're seeing. Is if you stack those all on top, that would be the total scrolling area of the overlay. It shows how the contrast of the controls is so light, it is hard to determine if one is active or at what degree it is active. Some of the text and icons are illegible. The language selector, which is the one over on the far right, commits the internationalization sin of using flags to choose language and provides no alt attributes for those flags. The overlay itself violates at least 3 WCAG success criteria from just a few seconds of examination. Part of this is because the configuration options for the overlay customer do not prevent them from choosing colors that clearly fail contrast checks. Here, the white on the white text on the sort of pink-white background has a contrast ratio of 1.2 to 1. To restate this, the overlay vendor's product allowed its customer to do this. Now, here in this video, we can see that the browser's default focus ring is active. But then the browser alert prompting the user to activate the overlay appears right there. If the user declines, that focus ring is somehow removed from the page. The only clue that focus is changing is in the browser status bar or when the page jumps to scroll down. Here, I navigate an overlay vendor's site, and as a new page is loading, it grays itself as if a modal will appear. And then some hidden audio starts to play.
Hi, I'm Ronnie from Accessibility, the #1 fully automated ADA and WCAG compliance solution. In this video, you will learn how Accessibility's AI-powered technology makes any website accessible in compliance with the WCAG 2.1, the ADA.
You could see that I clicked on the gray area in the hopes that maybe a hidden video modal would disappear. I scrolled around looking for player controls. I also hit the escape key with no luck. This page itself is a good example of a 1.4.2 audio control violation and 1.2.1 audio only and video only pre-recorded violation. This is the accessus.ai site. Now here is an overlay button trigger with an icon of a paper boat or a hat, really not sure, and the visible text customized accessibility. The browser dev tools indicate it has focus. So I've tabbed over to it. I know it has focus. In the dev tools, I explicitly set focus so I can confirm the focus styles. But the browser dev tools show me, not in this screenshot, that there's an outline none important that has been applied to that control, which means there's no visible style. So right off the bat, that's a 247 focus visible failure. The boat icon image has alt text. The alt text does not describe the image. Instead, it reads manage display settings. It feels like a 1.1.1 non-text content failure to me because it's not describing the image. But that also makes the full accessible name of the button, quote, manage display settings, customized accessibility, end quote. It's a pretty long name. And that's, we can only see the customized accessibility part of that. But to compound it, the button has an ARIA label, and that ARIA label reads facility, adapt display. And that overrides the text that we can see, which immediately causes a 2.5.3 label and name failure. So the button that triggers the accessibility features for the abilities.com site has 3 WCAG failures on its own, even before you've tried to use it. It is genuinely introducing WCAG risk at this point. Now, I have some more examples that are pulled from Accessibility. The reason Accessibility is more prominent in this talk and my tweets and my posts is because it seems to be the loudest at using its venture funding to promote its product. It took a year for Accessibility to update the terms on its site after I flagged these things I'm going to show you. I don't know if these terms are written into their contracts. I haven't seen their contracts. The contracts might even retain the language that I'm going to walk through in a moment. Either way, other vendors have made similar compliance promises and may have similarly mooted those promises in their own terms and contracts. So from the Accessibility homepage, does Accessibility protect me from lawsuits? Absolutely. Accessibility turns inaccessible websites into WCAG and ADA compliant websites. But not only that, Accessibility provides you with a litigation support package in case you need to prove your ADA website compliance and guides you through the process. Again, that's the Accessibility homepage. Another from the Accessibility homepage. Does Accessibility cover all accessibility requirements? Yes, exclamation mark. Accessibility covers the WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, version 2.1 at the AA level success criteria, and in certain areas, even level AAA. This is a step beyond what legislation requires. Now, that differed from the Accessibility Terms and Conditions page here captured in December 2020, which I understand has been a bit of time ago now. In this section, Accessibility is defining the word standard to mean specifically, quote, WCAG 2.1 level AA success criteria, end quote. From the Accessibility terms, the functionality of the Accessibility systems requires that the licensee website in which they are embedded be websites based solely on HTML files and tags, and that the source code be written according to the standard, which we've defined a moment ago, of the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, without any errors or validation warning in W3C's troubleshooting inspections. Please note that licensee changes to such website may impact the functionality of the service. By way of example, Accessibility systems do not support other components such as Canvas, Flash, and/or SVG. Essentially, what Accessibility's terms here state is that its customer websites must already meet the standard, which they've already defined as WCAG 2.1 AA, with no warnings, with no errors or even warnings from the validator. So clean pass all around. Essentially, your site must be WCAG compliant to conform to Accessibility's terms for a product guaranteeing to make your site WCAG compliant. Accessibility goes on to exempt PDFs, Flash, SVG files, and even any mobile devices not running Android 8 or iOS 10. Not older versions prior to those, and not later versions released after that, but exclusively Android 8 or iOS 10. Again, these terms have changed since I captured this, but this was the marketing angle. This was the message. These were their terms that they used for years. Now, to remind us that Accessibility is not the only one making these claims, here is a bit from UserWay's site. It claims it will make your site ADA compliant, which is not really a thing. It brags about the lack of lawsuits mentioning it. I don't have a LexisNexis account, so I haven't been able to absolutely confirm that. It claims to have a strong reputation in the disability community. It asserts its privacy chops, and it claims it is secure by not tracking people with disabilities. Now, UserWay may be right about lawsuits mentioning its products. Again, don't have that LexisNexis subscription, but I can say that many lawsuits do not name the overlay vendor. Many of these vendors claim they can protect their customers from lawsuits, though. Accessibility's CEO has even written, and I want to quote this, never, not once, had encountered a company that got sued because of Accessibility, end quote. That's a statement from Accessibility's CEO, never encountered a company that got sued because of Accessibility. Yet in 2020, over 250 companies were sued after investing in overlays. The lawsuit pace picked up to almost one per day by the end of that year. Here are just 5 examples, at least one of which mentions the vendor by name. 4 of them mention Accessibility despite its CEO's very public claims. I'm going to list them all off. Colasar versus Bayet LLC, Thomas Klaus and Robert Jehoda versus Upright Technologies, Blair Douglas versus Masterbuilt Manufacturing LLC, Murphy versus iBobs LLC, Fischler et al. Versus Dorai Homes, and finally, Lighthouse et al. Versus ADP. The Lighthouse versus ADP case goes further and explicitly states that, quote, for the purpose of this agreement, overlay solutions, such as those currently provided by companies such as AudioEye and Accessibility, will not suffice to achieve accessibility, end quote. I think that's a very clear statement. The iBobs case concluded in a settlement where iBobs has to create an accessibility team, perform an audit, adopt a policy statement, implement an accessibility strategy, and provide accessibility training. It doesn't really sound like the overlay protected iBobs in that scenario. Wired magazine wrote an article titled, "This company tapped AI for its website and landed in court." I'm going to read an excerpt from the article. In a statement, Accessibility's head of marketing, Gil Moggan, said the company had analyzed iBob's website and found it complied with accessibility standards. Accessibility offers clients assistance with litigation, but iBobs declined, the statement said. In its own statement, iBobs said Accessibility failed to respond to requests for meetings with its lawyers. Quote, iBobs is no longer working with Accessibility, nor will we in the future, end quote, the statement said. Now, sometimes a company relies on the overlay as its only way to become accessible to its company, to its customers. But what happens when the script will not load? Malwarebytes has blocked them. Ad blockers have blocked them. Firefox Enhanced Privacy Protection blocks them. But what if the script has an error or if the network chunks? Is your site still, air quote, protected just because the network hiccuped? Are the users helped in that scenario? This screenshot of the browser dev tools shows that the overlay script has not loaded. Worse, the accessibility link in the footer is a div. It's a div with a tab index and a button roll, but it does nothing when it's been clicked. If you tap it, click it with a mouse, try and tab to it, whatever, it does nothing because the overlay script that's supposed to replace it with a real control doesn't fire. So now that site isn't, quote, protected. On the Malwarebytes forum, a user wanted to know if the script from an overlay vendor was a tracker or not. The Malwarebytes staff acknowledged that the overlay script had indeed been blocked. Until the user asked the question, Malwarebytes had blocked the overlay for all its customers for potentially years. They didn't give a timeline for how long they've been blocking it. The claims of no privacy risk are spurious at best. A data protection impact assessment, or a DPIA, is a process to help you identify and minimize the data protection risks of a project. You must do a DPIA for processing information that is likely to result in a high risk to individuals, but these vendors do not provide one. As a result, any claimed GDPR compliance is in question automatically. Remember that these overlay scripts must parse all of the content on the page, essentially reading everything that you are surfing. Some of them keep your settings from site to site by setting tracking cookies. Now, here in a tweet, Leonie Watson demonstrates how cavalierly overlay vendors treat this compliance. Reading Leonie's tweet, hello, Accessibility. I've asked you by DM and by phone for a copy of your data protection impact assessment, DPIA. You have not responded. Since asking discreetly has not worked, I am now asking openly for you to share your DPIA since you claim GDPR conformance. Thank you, end quote. She asked this on April 1st, 2021. So what, we're 11 months from when she asked, she still has not heard back. I'm not a lawyer, but this feels very much like a GDPR violation on the part of Accessibility. The DSW Shoes website uses UsableNet's assistive overlay. Though instead of an accessibility icon in the corner, which is what we've come to associate with most overlays, it uses the text, enable accessibility, in gray on gray located in the header of the site. If you block third-party cookies, you get the following browser alert when you try to activate it. Quote, an embedded page at a40.usablenet.com says your web browser privacy settings are preventing the accessibility mode to stay enabled. Try enabling third-party cookies to ensure you receive accessible updates to the website. End quote. This presents a false choice between security and what may be a more accessible experience. Nowhere does the user have the opportunity to understand how those third-party cookies will be used or what information will be shared. Essentially, a user has to disclose a disability or access need with no indication how that information will persist. It's also a reminder that these products don't make a site more accessible. Instead, these products make your computer try to make a site less broken. Overlay vendors will overpromise in their marketing, making claims about their utility and popularity while under-delivering on them. These vendors rely on a combination of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. They know many website owners do not understand accessibility laws. Even as users complain about the problems with these products, the vendors use astroturfing techniques to drown it out. This is an advertisement from one of the overlay vendors. It's a cartoon of a man at a computer happily exclaiming, finally, my website is up. Two men in suits suddenly appear next to him holding legal papers and say, "Not so fast. Nice website, but it's not accessible. You've been served." The website owner, now crying, hands up in the air, says, "I'm broke now. Why bother?" In the background, the two men can be seen walking away carrying bags of money. Overlay vendors use fear of lawsuits to sell their product, not a desire to help users. The cartoon is this particular cartoon is careful to not show disabled people as the villains, but the implication is clear. The laws that protect disabled people will cost you money unless you pay for this vendor's help. One vendor cited that a, quote, silent majority, end quote, of users like the overlay product, and that as a result, the complaints that appear online are only exceptions. Here, Chancey Fleet tweets that, excuse me, quote, "The founders of Accessibility are interpreting the complacency of non-disabled customers and the bone-deep fatigue of disabled users to mean that a silent majority," their actual words, "is grateful for and enjoys Accessibility. Let's not be silent then," end quote. It was in reply to a tweet from Marco Salsiccia, who says, quote, "Pretty much, as well as citing their silent majority of blind users who approve and test their product, I ran into so many issues just going through their example sites alone, I didn't want to give them a fully free audit of how much they were doing wrong," end quote. In addition, these vendors have a history of astroturfing review sites, social media, and the web in general. The effort is to ensure only their message appears, and they have the money, the SEO chops, and the lack of integrity to pull it off. I have links to Twitter spam, Medium articles, paid promotion pieces at industry sites, questionable reviews on other platforms, even Wikipedia entries that were flagged by the moderators as spam. This image here shows a headline from WP Tavern when one vendor had all the fake reviews for its WordPress plugin removed. In addition to individual complaints, there has been press coverage of these companies. Users with some standing in the disability community have spoken about overlay failures in general. Some users are so frustrated they share tips and tools to block overlays. Excuse me. One vendor has even threatened users with lawsuits. NBC News ran a story with the headline, "Blind People Advocates Slam Company Claiming to Make Websites ADA Compliant." Vice also ran an article headlined, "People with Disabilities Say This AI Tool is Making the Web Worse for Them." The Mosen at Large podcast devoted an entire episode to the question of the value of overlays. Episode 105 asked, "Can AI make the web fully accessible in a few short years, or might it make matters worse?" A chunk of the follow-up episode was devoted to more frustrations from users. Other community podcasts have discussed these tools as well. Some users are so frustrated that they have written tools to block overlays. Accessibility Gone gives instructions for how to block overlays using ad blockers or by editing your host file. Accessibility is a browser extension to disable overlays in the browser. One overlay company has opted to fight back. In April, last April, because we're not in this April yet, in April, facilities attorneys started sending letters demanding removal of any criticism. I have a screenshot here of a letter to Kona that shows two tweets about facility. Kona declined to comply with the request and wrote about why. Another disabled user, who I'm not naming here, but I have shared their plight on Twitter, was subpoenaed to appear in court. Facility asked for 5,000 euros in damages, 5,500 euros in fines, and in order to cease comments that may, quote, discredit the facility solution, end quote. I can't think of a better way to prove your product helps disabled users than by suing disabled people who say it does not. Great way to double down. Overlay vendors also claim that organizations love them, but community and industry organizations have been clear that they do not. National Federation of the Blind, after accepting one as a sponsor for its annual event, went so far as to not only drop the sponsor, but to then issue a statement rebuking its very existence. This part of the statement stood out to me. Quote, in particular, it is the opinion of the board that Accessibility peremptorily and scornfully dismisses the concerns of blind people have about its products and its approach to accessibility. The nation's blind will not be placated, bullied, or bought off. Therefore, the board revoked Accessibility's sponsorship of the convention on June 22, 2021, end quote. The CSUN Assistive Technology Conference briefly had an overlay on its site and was met with such rapid and vocal anger that it was dropped immediately. It may very well have been implemented without anyone's knowledge, based on this tweet, which reads, quote, "The accessibility overlay has been removed. It was implemented without our approval. The conference does not endorse this product, and we apologize for the situation, which has now been corrected," end quote. The Olympic Committee created the We the 15 site in an effort to promote the Paralympics, but in doing so, it used an overlay. After responses from users in the disability community, the overlay was removed within a couple days. That same overlay is still on the main Olympics website, which may be a function of the vendor promoting it so heavily in its marketing materials. One of the We the 15's tweets in response to all of this, quote, "Thank you for alerting us about these issues. We're disappointed too that we've fallen short in this area. We've gathered together some new experts who are helping us to fix this. It would be great to have your support going forward to make the next iteration a complete success," end quote. Many overlay vendors claim that detractors are really just frustrated competitors. It's a tactic to diminish all of the criticism and just say it's just market competition. The overlay fact sheet, however, kind of disproves that. Nearly 700 people have signed it so far. They represent web specification contributors, internal accessibility experts from companies in higher education, lawyers for the disabled, contributors to assistive technology, and end users with disabilities. I encourage you to visit the site at overlayfactsheet.com and read through the information and links. It identifies strengths and weaknesses of overlay widgets and automated repair in general. It also touches on technical and privacy concerns. In addition to the signatures, there are statements from users. There is one professional organization for digital accessibility practitioners, one that I'm generally aware of, the International Association of Accessibility Professionals, IAAP. It is a division of G3ICT, the Global Initiative for Inclusive Information and Communication Technologies. It's weird having to say this out loud when I've only had to type it. Anyway, it allows membership for overlay vendors. Overlay vendors then brand their marketing materials with the IAAP logo, and overlay vendors use this for some veneer of credibility. Some organizations display it on their website footer. Userway and Max Access each do so, using the weight of the accessibility professionals as a marketing boost. Others might get promotional consideration, as Audio Eye did when IAAP tweeted an Audio Eye post. A post which, if you read, was arguably lifted pretty directly from W3C documents. There was finally some fallout, though. On January 17, IAAP promised a proactive response to that tweet and overlay membership. Even though I raised the concern in September along with some others, the good news is that they were starting to act from some of that fallout. The organization produced a survey for members and non-members, and the results of that survey were posted this past Friday, February 25th. Of the 609 responses, 591, 97% were not overlay vendors. Not. That means there were still a bunch who were. 81% of them, or 478 responses, state that they do not compete with overlay vendors. 90% of the responses, or 549 responses, say they have seen false claims by overlay vendors. And 86%, or 533 responses, believe IAAP should comment on marketing claims in general. And 90% believe IAAP should comment on overlay marketing claims specifically. As we have seen, overlays cannot make your site or your brand better overnight. 24 hours, nope. So to wrap this talk up, paying attention to time, yay, I want to cover some steps that you can undertake without overlays. See, I got under and the over. Anyway, really did shoehorn that theme in here. So this one is for folks who are actually building out there in the trenches, making things, building sites, and so on. Plan ahead. Hire a consultant who has some experience in this space. They can help you choose a vendor who prioritizes accessibility and write this into your contracts. They can also direct you to technologies that have already been vetted, or maybe direct you away from ones that are terrible. Some platforms have accessible features already. For example, WordPress offers 114 free accessibility-ready themes, built with a baseline of compliance already in place. Add some free online resources when you create your content, and you may have all you need to get going. There's even a free tool to generate an accessibility statement for your site provided by the very organization that sets accessibility standards, the W3C. If you already have a site, you can use one of the many free automated accessibility checkers on the market, assuming you aren't interested in getting into the browser's own tools, that is. There is Arc, Axe, Lighthouse, Wave, and WebHint, among others. While they won't catch all of the issues, maybe around that 30% mark again, they will at least give you a sense where you stand. Where you have gaps, document them. Identify what's wrong, put together a plan and timeline to address them, and publish it on your site. Do that with an accessibility statement. As long as you honor the timelines you provide, you're the one who can choose what your ongoing budget will be to address them, even if it only comes out to $1,000 per year or whatever is the going rate that an overlay vendor is pitching you. If you're affected by overlays as a consumer, you can take some action. In the US, the Federal Trade Commission has rules that advertising must not be deceptive, must include evidence, and cannot be unfair. OverlayFalseClaims.com provides documented examples of overlay vendor false claims, along with consumer complaint resources for the United States, both federal and state, Canada, and New Zealand. You can use information there to file a false advertising complaint. You can also open a PR to submit information for filing complaints in other countries to the OverlayFalseClaims.com site. So if you're in a country where you understand how you can do this, give some information to that site so that other people in your country can benefit from that. Now, don't forget to claim your IAAP continuing accessibility education credits. They're pre-approved. No vetting of this talk was needed. While you're claiming them, though, remember this is your opportunity to ask IAAP to drop overlay vendors from its membership. Probably mention this talk as well. If they're going to be angry at somebody, it should be me. I'm not a member, so it's easier that way for everybody. And that's it. That's the gist of the talk. I have a site. I have a page loaded on my site that has links to the material that I've been referencing throughout. Also has some of the videos and images. You can scan the QR code that's up on your screen now. I know that's weird, but people did it for the Super Bowl for some reason. Or you can go to, read the URL, rosel.li/A11yNYC-overlays. That's rosel.li/A11yNYC-overlays. And I'll dump that link into the chat once I can figure out how to switch windows. And that's it. That's my talk. Thank you. Feel free to ask me questions or make fun of me or talk about my awesome feeds.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much, Adrian. You had tons of engagement happening in the chat while you gave the excellent presentation. And, you know, I didn't mention it in the preamble of introducing Adrian, but I did a post that I linked into about the iBobs case. And when I looked at Adrian's website and saw, I guess I'll call them receipts, as we call them in today's language, the same way that your presentation today, I really appreciated how you showed, you know, the evidence of all these different things. And there's probably an opportunity for some of these companies to say, oh, we changed our terms from this to this. I really appreciated the screenshots and seeing sort of the history of a lot of the things that have happened, even in this evolving narrative. And I'll just echo your call to action that I think if we can tweet at IAAP, we can write the different business bureaus. It's really cool to see those options. And I'm going to now switch to, is there anyone here that has a question? I'd like to turn it over to our audience for a question.
Should I scroll through the chat?
Yeah. Can check that really quick. Give
Oh,
us
there's a
one
lot
moment.
in there. There's an alarming amount in there. If anybody has captured that URL, because I don't have a browser open on my machine, I fear if I do that, all of a sudden all my screens are going to turn off. If you could dump that URL into the chat. I'm also really hoping that my post went live. Thank you. Thank you, Graham. So at that URL, I have videos. I have links to the things I was talking about, links to the sites, the accessibility terms, for example. I link to the Wayback Archive version of that page. So to your point, Thomas, I always have the receipts because I expect at some point I'm going to get a letter.
Yeah.
An official looking letter that I'm going to throw in the trash, maybe, or I'll panic. I don't know what I'll do. But I want to make sure that all of the claims that I'm making are backed up with data.
Right.
And I also want to remind people that the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. If they were lying to you last year, why do you think they wouldn't be lying to you today? And I really think that's the really important takeaway from this. If you were a bad actor 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, you're probably still a bad actor. You've just learned from all this criticism, different words you can use, and that's it.
Totally agree. So we do have a question from Keith Laidlaw. He said, overlay vendors are clearly marketing their products with non-technical, risk-averse managers in mind. For example, mine, who seem determined to add overlays to several e-commerce sites I manage. Do you have any tips or tactics that will help convince those same managers that these solutions are anything but?
So that's tough because I can present all of this information and I feel I have an audience that for the most part is already on board with this. And this is sort of a validating talk. For individuals who don't have this background, though, it's important to understand why they chose a solution. Was it money? Was it a timeline? Was it a legal fear or something? Ideally, there's enough information now freely available, overlay fact sheet, overlay false claims, my site, this talk, tons of other places, that you should be able to first ask why they chose it, and then come back to them with reasons why that probably wasn't a good choice anyway. If it's timelines, you can demonstrate nothing's been fixed. If it's a legal concern, you can point them to lawsuits. If it's cost, you can walk through that slide where I talk about what you can do now to protect yourself from a legal perspective and keep your costs down. But then you can also demonstrate, if they genuinely think they're helping people, you can demonstrate all the people in the community who are so viscerally angry at how their disability has been co-opted as just a way to generate revenue for a well-funded venture startup.
I also had a question on, it was eye-opening for me. I definitely had missed the conversation on things like Malwarebytes or Ghostery, flagging those. Is that still ongoing? Or I mean, is that just more like it could change any day? They get flagged.
So,
they don't get
like Malwarebytes had it flagged, had Accessibility, I think it was Accessibility, I'd have to go back in my slides, it's all mush now. Had it flagged for a while until somebody raised it. It's probably not flagged anymore. But for all we know is if you have any internal policies or custom settings, those things could still be blocked. And there's no reason that they couldn't end up being blocked at some other point. And as far as I know, Ghostery still blocks. I hear people say Ghostery has blocked them for me. I just don't remember which ones. And that's anecdata, so I haven't put it in here until I can prove it myself.
And maybe also related to that, you mentioned at the top of the talk, like a list of, obviously can never be comprehensive because these companies can start any day, but how did you get the ones that you listed? I mean, how do you become aware of like someone's operating in this space?
People tell me.
Yeah.
That's really all it is.
Okay.
I think I first wrote about terrible overlay solutions in 2015. And there was a bit of a dust up in the accessibility industry where people were talking about it. And then I just paid attention. And then some of them started to appear in marketing emails like, popular website that talks all about CSS sends me a marketing email with all of its posts, and there's a big ad banner in the middle for one of these overlay vendors. And it's one I hadn't heard about before. Or some client is saying, oh, hey, somebody pitched me on this. Can you look at this? But for the most part, it's from people in the community who encountered one, had a terrible experience, and have flagged me or other people who, are, n degrees of separation away and have told me.
Yeah. And it seems like just from what you presented, but most of those companies probably have a general similar pitch that they're going to solve everything at this thing.
So much so that I think AudioEye was doing Accessibility or vice versa for stealing technology and ideas.
Right.
The point being that they're all up in each other's business because they're all clawing at the same space.
Mm-hmm. So this is a different question, maybe tangential, but is it really safe to use an accessible WordPress theme? I've read that as soon as you add a plugin or write a child theme, all bets are off.
Yep, absolutely true. But that's the case with just about anything out of the box that's accessible. As soon as you touch it, if you don't know what you're doing, there's a risk you could pull the wrong thing and the wheels could fall off. That's an unfortunate reality of all technology anyway. Anything can be broken pretty readily. But there are some good resources out there on how to write good content. Plugins are absolutely a risk at all times for everybody, but not just for accessibility, but also for security and also for performance and so many other factors. So I'd like to think a team is already doing some due diligence on plugins. If you've already got 5 things you're looking at, add accessibility in there as a 6th item. I mean, make it the 1st item, but the 6th thing that you add as number 1, of course, first, not 6th, first. But yeah, to me, it's just part of that vetting process before you choose any technology anyway.
Cool. And I want to highlight just the comment that I thought was very interesting was from one of the commenters saying, hey, they're trying to work into their procurement language. Don't procure accessibility overlays. And so I mentioned, hey, if you guys can share the language, I'm sure you'd be interested in that too. But it's like, how can we get this to be more boilerplate for other organizations that care about it? We don't want this solution. I mean, would you say, like, do you have any idea of, like, is there any boilerplate language or it's something that people can use to?
I think that boilerplate language would be sort of industry specific. So for example, higher education has has a significantly different procurement process from, a multinational conglomerate bank. HSBC is going to do something different than an Ivy League school, for example. And because of those differences in processes and vetting and how they go about securing the funds, et cetera, they're going to need to have their own language. But absolutely, look around, ask other people if they've got it. Take a look at the AudioEye ADP suit for, pull that language out, as an example. But once you get that, share it. That could be great information to share on the overlay fact sheet. That's a pull request that I'd be happy to make if there's some good content. And Carl doesn't yet hate me, so there's a reasonable chance he would merge it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, and I think that's what we kind of were saying in the chat. Like, if we can get stuff for people to reuse, we'll amplify it. We all want to do that. I mean, I think at least I can say I share the same belief as Adrian. Love the presentation today. There's a comment from Billy Gregory. Hi, Billy. What's your take on conferences and podcasts giving these overlay companies a public platform to discuss their products? We've seen panels about overlays at events, and notable accessibility professionals engage in conversation on podcasts. Helpful, or do you feel this unnecessarily legitimizes these companies?
I think it unnecessarily legitimizes. I think that overlay vendors jump at these opportunities because any platform is a platform that they'll take advantage of. But if they can have that platform with somebody who's got name or brand recognition, it lends credibility. And it's sort of the weird stolen valor of their industry, is they're always going to try and attach their overlay product name to somebody who's got reputation. And it's a two-pronged attack. it's reputational harm to the person who brought them in and stood up for them. And it's also demonstrating to the industry in general that we can't necessarily trust those events anymore. There's a big reason that CSUN caught as much flack as it did. And it was pretty swift and pretty aggressive flack. National Federation for the Blind, another one. They are trying too hard. And I think that the people who are actually affected by it recognize how bad that is.
Okay, and then there's sort of a, in this boilerplate comment, Lee says, I've been noticing the proliferation of overlays on e-commerce sites where I regularly shop. I've made a decision to not spend my money on these sites, but haven't contacted them about it. It'd be great to have a boilerplate to use to contact these companies. Is there anything like that that exists currently for like?
I don't think so.
Telling, oh.
I don't think so. And it's a great idea. I want to remind, so it's a great idea, as is having language for procurement documents and for contracts and for so many other places. I love the idea. I really do. I also want to qualify. I'm an independent accessibility consultant who can only make money when I'm billing people. And every time I'm out there taking swings at overlay vendors, that's revenue, that's food I'm not putting on my table. Overlay companies are proudly backed to the tune of tens of millions of dollars. I can't fight them alone. I just don't have the time or the resources to do it. But if people have good ideas like this, share them, send them to me, I'll post them. Use the overlay fact sheet. Overlay false claims is sort of an outgrowth of some of that. What action can we take? So yeah, maybe we can make something happen there. Thomas, lightning struck in your room.
Yeah. So I think that's a good segue, though, that, when the lights go on and off, we're kind of nearing the end of the talk today, but I think a lot of what was discussed, the QR code, we will also share into the meetup page, make sure everything's hyperlinked. We'll get this into the YouTube. Tons of awesome information today. And again, thank you to Adrian. Hopefully this YouTube video, the recording of this presentation at Accessibility New York can also serve as a resource in your own actions to potentially combat an overlay solution in your organization and or to help people gain education in this space. So again, thank you so much everyone for being here, and especially to Adrian Roselli for the presentation today. We want to again thank our sponsors, Adobe, Equal Entry, Fable, and Google. We want to say thank you again to Jolie McPhee from the Internet Society, the Accessibility Special Interest Group, for streaming us to YouTube, and also to Texas Captions for the captions today. Our next presentation is coming up in April, and it's still going to be online. Definitely please contact me if you're in the New York area about your comforts of meeting in person again. Probably at some point, eventually we've got to start meeting in person as well. But our next event will be Wednesday, April 6th with Jared Smith from WebAIM, and he'll be talking about accessible typefaces, fonts, and text, optimizing the reading experience. And we hope to see you there as well. Thank you as always, and hope to see you at a future event.
I'm going for king cake now.
All right.
Do I just?
At ID 24.